Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the sofa in my house, and welcome back to another video. And in this video, I'm talking about domestic rugby. Now that's noteworthy only because I had a look back on the channel. It's been 3 months since I last did a video on domestic rugby, and actually it's been ages since they've been back to back to back, obviously because of the World Cup, but not just because of the World Cup. And it's interesting having a channel like this, thinking to myself, how do I cover the domestic game? Because rugby's a funny sport in that international matches get so much more attention, so many more eyeballs, there's so much more interest around it. It's a lot easier to know what to cover. And generally on the channel, I think anyone running a channel like this would try and think to create videos that they think the most people are going to watch. Whereas when you're doing one on domestic rugby, it's just not. Even this video, I know there'll be way less people clicking on it than there would be an international one. So for those of you that have clicked on it, I guess my question to you is, how would you like to see a YouTube channel cover the domestic game? Because on the one hand, I want to create content that people want to watch, and for the most part, that is going to be international stuff, certainly for the time being. But there's another part of me that thinks having a channel like this, there's at least a small responsibility to try and cover the Premiership, cover domestic stuff, at least in some capacity. I don't think it's going to be much at the moment, but I still want to try and do it. At the moment, I'm thinking I'll kind of do sporadic roundups of the Premiership, not just focusing on single teams or single results, but overall, which is probably what I'm going to do in this video. 5 rounds gone, about a quarter of the season gone in the Gallagher Premiership. So just run through each team and where I think they are. I might then do it after round 10, round 15, and then as we head into the playoffs towards the end of the year. But so the question for you is, what do you want to see in terms of domestic rugby on the channel? Oh, and by the way, if you haven't already, make sure you like the video and you subscribe to the channel as well, but comment down below, because I think it's one of the interesting things for anyone that does a channel like this. How do you cover it, if you even try at all? But I want to try and persevere at least a little bit, even though it is international rugby that gets the most clicks. But there we are, Gallagher Premiership, 5 rounds gone. It's always a strange start to the season when you've got the World Cup, kind of the back end of the World Cup when the season is starting, because people pay far less attention to it. Teams are without their international players, and so it takes a little bit longer for the dust to settle on the league a little bit. If you think of the last 2 years, a couple of years ago when Leicester ended up winning it, they set their stall out from week 1. They went on a big winning streak. Last season as well, pretty early on, it was clear that Sale and Saracens were the 2 best teams. This season, I think it's a little different because of the World Cup, but I do wonder if we are starting to have a clearer indication of maybe where teams sit in the league. So I'm just going to go through it in terms of seeding at the moment. Harlequins and Sale up there at the top, the 2 teams that have won 4 of their 5 games. Sale, I'm delighted to see that, by the way, because after losing in the Premiership final to Saracens, the question for Alex Sanderson's team was always going to be, could they back it up? Could they develop? I love some of the balance of their team. I think we kind of know how Sale are going to play. It's how they've played for a while. They can be brutally physical. But you also look at Carpenter and Roebuck, Reed out wide. They've got some great local talent that they're bringing through in that team. And when we start to begin to have discussions about England Six Nations teams building into the future, I think they've got a few guys in that team that are worthy of that conversation. Gus Waugh at 9 is probably another one. So Sale, I like them. I think they're on the right path. They've had a good start to the season, and you always know that up in Manchester it's going to be a tough place to go. Harlequins is probably slightly different, because from being Premiership champions, they were kind of around the top 4. They then slipped off a little bit, still one of the better teams in the league, but they haven't been their all-conquering best since that season. Again, I think they've probably got a good team. You look at the balance of that squad. I still think Will Collier up front with Joe Marler, Marcus Smith and Danny Kerr still there pulling the strings. The likes of Caden Murley, who's been out, but Lewis Liner, Tyrone Green's had a phenomenal start to the year with some of the tries that he's been scoring. Harlequins, again, are they back? Are they going to cement themselves at the top of that Premiership table? And are they going to be there come the business end of the season? I think there's probably quite a good chance. The other thing with this season, because of what happened to Wasps, Worcester and London Irish, it's a shorter season. So I mentioned it already, but we've played 5 rounds. We're over a quarter of the way through the season. There is less time for teams to play catch-up, which, as we get further down the league table, means that I think the teams towards the bottom, the situation they find themselves in is even more stark. But then after Harlequins and Sale, we get to kind of the middle of the table. So Bath, Northampton, Exeter. It's going to be really interesting to see how they work themselves out. Exeter are in a rebuild, but have had some brilliant results so far this year. They still don't look as strong away from home, though, as they do at home, which might be all right. If they can make Sandy Park a fortress, if they can win, let's say, all of their home games, that's 9 wins. I think you then only need to be picking up 2 or 3 wins on the road to get yourself in the top 4, potentially, because I think the division will be quite even. So I like where Exeter are. I think in a lot of our minds, they're ahead of schedule compared with where we thought they would be at this point, looking at losing Cowan Dickey, Jack Noel, the Simmons brothers, Dave Ewers, a lot of key players from that team, from the golden age of the Chiefs, have left. I think they, from what we've seen in the opening 5 rounds, are ahead of where a lot of us would have expected them to be, but there's undoubtedly still some things still to work on, particularly we saw in that defeat at the weekend to Northampton. Speaking of Northampton, the most encouraging sign for them, I think, we know that they have a good attacking game. They've always had a good attacking game. They have lost at the business end of the season when it comes to the playoffs because they don't have the defence and they don't have the muscle up front. And I think that is an area that they are clearly focusing on because their defence, in my opinion, has been much better so far this season. And I think their forward pack has been matching up pretty well so far from what we've seen. It's early days, I know, but if I was a Northampton fan, I'd be quietly confident that they're heading in the right direction. And then we get on to Bath. And we cannot talk about Bath without talking about Finn Russell and him shushing the shed on Friday night, which was an iconic moment immediately. I think he's making a difference to them. Bath, for years, on paper, had a team that you thought they should be brilliant, and they always underachieved. I wonder whether Finn Russell is the sort of player that his personality is already being stamped on that team. Because he's the fly half, it's easier, but he plays with a smile. He's relaxed. He'll try things. It won't always come off, and that's okay because that's the game he plays. And he put Ollie Lawrence and Max Ajomo through a few holes really nicely against Gloucester on Friday night. You think of that as a midfield partnership of Russell, Ajomo, Lawrence. That's potentially blockbuster. I suppose with Bath, it's always a case of let's wait and see because they have had false dawns before. We have expected more from them than they've delivered before. But I just wonder actually whether Finn Russell could be the guy that suits that club perfectly. And the other thing to mention here, he's key for the Premiership. I think there's a dearth of stars in the Premiership because of the salary cap, because that going down, people moving overseas to France because they can get paid more. We understand the reasons why. I think Finn Russell as a signing is really important for this Bath team. Then we're on to Saracens. They've won their last 3. They lost their first 2. I think they are just starting to shift through the gears. We know that as the defending champions, I still think they're the team to beat. They will get up there. They will be as part of that top 4. I think they probably had to fast track some of the players back from the World Cup because they lost their opening 2 games, because they know you can't get too far behind in the race for the top 4 this year because there's less games. But I think they'll be fine. They have quality there. They're the defending champions. They're the team to beat. And then we get onto the sides where there's question marks over. Bristol, Gloucester and Leicester. I'll get onto Newcastle. They've lost all their games. So Bristol, they finished 9th last year, 10th the season before. The season before that was when they finished 1st and blew up spectacularly against Quins in that now infamous semi-final. And I think it is completely fair to ask, where is the progress for this Bristol team? Given the resources they have, they are as well-funded a club in the Premiership. They have arguably the best training ground. They have a great stadium. They have a good fan base. They're in a great city. They should be producing more than they are. And I think the questions around Pat Lam and the fact they gave him the long contract, and since then it has been downhill. And I don't know all the reasons why that is, but Bristol, I think if they continue to lose games, Pat Lam's going to be under pressure. He has to be. You can't produce the results they've produced over the last few years, and now looking at it, having played 5 games this year and lost 3 of them, and them not be under pressure. Bristol fans, let me know what you think. But I don't know. I don't think it looks good for Bristol, unfortunately. Gloucester are a different case. Now, they lost all 6 games last year, Gloucester, and I saw some murmurings amongst their fans questioning George Skivington after the defeat to Bath, conceding 35 points in the second half in a Friday night derby. I wouldn't be as concerned for them at the moment. I think Gloucester are trying to develop their game. When they had that good season a few years ago when they finished 5th, they had a driving maul that no one could stop, but probably didn't have enough outside of that. I think they're trying to develop that. I think we started to see that against Bath when it went well in the first half. So bear with it for the time being would be my suggestion to Gloucester. I don't necessarily think they'll be top 4 this year, but I would give them time to try and work it out. And Leicester are the other ones where they've only won 1 game, but you still look at that team and you feel they should be better than that. The question, I suppose, new coaches coming in, some ageing players in key positions. Where will they be at the end of the year? Again, I'm not sure with Leicester at the moment. You can let me know in the comments. And then we have Newcastle. I mean, Newcastle don't spend as much as everyone else. They are rooted to the bottom of the table. My concern really is that Kingston Park, even though Newcastle used to not spend as much as everyone else, used to be a tough place to go. They still could pick up results there. If that starts to not be the case, then all of a sudden it looks pretty grim up there in the northeast. And it's crucial that we have a strong Newcastle. But unfortunately, the start to this season doesn't look too good. So that's kind of my roundup of where the Premiership is at the moment. You can let me know your thoughts. And what have you made of it so far? It's weird, isn't it, with the World Cup, because it gets lost in all the international rugby. Are you excited for it? I feel actually a little bit more engaged in the Premiership than I was last year, for example. I think maybe because there's an even number of teams again, I think it flows better. I think having a smaller division isn't the end of the world. I think there should be promotion relegation because I think that adds more jeopardy and interest towards the bottom of the table. So I feel a bit more engaged, but I don't think that's going to be the prevailing sentiment from most people at the moment. A hangover from what we saw with clubs going bust and things, perhaps. But yeah, let me know what you make of it. Let me know what sort of domestic rugby content you'd like to see on the channel, if any, or should it purely be internationals, which is where the main interest is. It's the age-old question for rugby union. Internationals gets all the views. Domestic game less so. I even thought about started watching all the South African teams in the URC because the South African numbers on the channel are always really big. But even their domestic game, I'm sure it would do all right, but I don't think it would do as well as maybe many would think. But anyway, let me know. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you drop a comment down below, and also give a little thumbs up on the video. Nice one. See you in the next one.